Welcome to today's episode of the Bryan G Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Gutierrez. If you're enjoying the show and receiving value from our content, please hit the subscribe button so that you won't miss out on the next episode. Now let's check out today's show. So if you listened to my podcast before, there's one thing that you heard me say many, many times, and that is buying and selling a home is a lot more, or there's a lot more to it than just acquiring and liquidating an asset. What if you're a young family with young children and where you're moving to requires that your children change school districts? Or if not school districts, if they have to move to a different school. So, for example, if they're in one elementary school, you move across town. Now they're going to be going to another, and what does that look like? And what are some of the things we need to take into consideration? So today, I asked a expert to join me, and a very, very special guest, my wife, Kim. Hi.
Hi. Thanks
Well,
for having me on.
Well, thanks for coming on. Of course, you can speak to this a lot more intelligently than I can. And so, for those of you who don't know you, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick?
Okay. Well, as Bryan said, I'm his wife. My name is Kim, and I actually have been an educator in elementary school for 21 years. So I've taught first grade and second grade. So it's me and the little people all day long, Monday through Friday. And I've been in the same district for all of that time, but Bryan and I live in a different district. So I have a very broad perspective on living in one district and having your kids go to school there, and then teaching in a different district and seeing the kids moving in and out of that district.
Right. And just for clarity, we live in the same house in the same district, but you work in a different district.
That's what I said.
Kids go.
I said Bryan and I live in a different district than what I teach in.
All right.
So I did say that.
Okay.
So yeah.
This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
This is going to be great.
It's going to be a great time.
This is the bring your wife to work day.
Ooh, fun. Nice. Okay.
So as we start to talk about this subject, I just want to clarify that this is not going to be about registering your child, for a new school or district, right? We're not talking about that. Of course, every school district is different. There's no way we can really speak to that. But kind of getting back to reiterate our topic is that, okay, so we started house hunting. It looks like you're going to be moving out of, either the school where your kids are right now or out of the school district into another school district, and what that might look like. So, and this is really part of our due diligence period. It's kind of funny when we have the inspection period. Most people think of that as the home inspection. They think of that the well and septic inspection, right? Well, part of that due diligence is also looking into school districts and things like that. That's all part of our due diligence. What's in the community around you? Are you close to a farm, right? I had a couple who didn't realize until they looked into it that there was a sewage treatment plant a quarter mile down the road, right? And they were like, oh, that's not good for us, right? Because if the wind changes and blows in that direction, right, that would be uncomfortable for everybody. So this is all part of that. So our inspection period, or our due diligence period, it includes all of that. And that's something we need to kind of think about, which, of course, I'll remind you as we go along, the different things that we need to qualify or to inspect is the school, the township around us, the kind of lifestyle that we're going to be living. And just for everyone to know, just to kind of put out there, we real estate agents, we have people ask us all the time, is this a good school district or not? And we cannot answer that due to licensing laws here in Michigan, because that's where we're based. If you're listening from elsewhere, we are not allowed to endorse any school district over the other. We're also not allowed, we have to be agnostic about it. We're not allowed to give a positive or negative opinion. The technical term is we're not allowed to steer people from one school district to another. So just so that you know that for the context of our conversation here today. So I guess where to start with that from you is I have a buyer. They're looking, say they're moving to your school district, and and what are some of the things that the parents need to think about, or some of the things that they need to do when they start considering that as a possibility?
Okay. Um, well, first off, as a parent, you definitely want to do your research, and you want to find your research in multiple places, because there are lots of little things that you can do to investigate a school district and find out what it has, what it doesn't have, what people think of it, why people attend it. But one thing is, every district has a big website, and there's a lot of stuff that you can find on there. And you can go in and click on all kinds of tabs just to find out how many schools they have, how many students they have, some of the programs that they offer. But on those websites, you're also going to be able to do things like go to their school board meetings. There are a lot of
Hmm,
districts now,
okay.
especially after COVID, they have started to video their school board meetings, and they typically have a tab that you can go to and you can watch some school board meetings, so that you can see some of the things, as far as like how they run things, how do they spend some of the money. A lot of those documents are also available online, to find out things about the logistics of the district. You can also go online and you can look at some of the programming or some of the curriculum that they might use,
Okay.
which is, when you're just new coming into school, you might not understand all that. But if you're a family that's moving from one district to another and you've already been in school, you already have some knowledge of programs or the way things are done. So, but you might then be able to see, oh, in like if you have a high school or different districts, sometimes we actually found this out because of our daughter. Um, Different districts may reorder when a student takes, like, say, biology versus physics. Like our ninth grader is taking physics, where I teach, the ninth graders, I think, are taking biology or something like that. So you might be able to find out some stuff like that.
So one of my questions that I was thinking about is you can also find out with those programs, say you have a child with special needs, right? So you'll be able to see what those school districts offer, correct? In your
Absolutely.
resery. And
Absolutely.
just so you guys know, we're not going to throw out any specific websites. One, there might be people who are not from Michigan listening to this, and every district has their own website. There's also some other kind of, I guess, sort of like consumer websites where they have school ratings, things like that. And again, so myself as an agent, I'm not allowed to endorse or to downplay a school district, but what we can do is direct you to, for example, michigan.gov slash whatever, right? So you can find out this information. And of course, most people, it being web savvy, can usually find those resources for them to look out. And of course, you can always contact that school district directly, right?
Yeah.
And get some direction there.
Um, can I add?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So, the other big thing is, you for those of you that are on social media, of course, you can go on social media and you can go to the local.
Because that's always really reliable, right?
Social media is super reliable. You and that's kind of like, that's my caveat, my clause here is, if you are a Facebook user,
Mhm.
there are people that are going to go on, and I see it all the time, where they will go on and say, "Hey, we're thinking of moving to this school district. What school do we want to choose, or do we want to even move into this district?" And I want you to kind of take that with your eyes open and your mind
Mm.
open, because people that do respond might be someone like me, who are like, we live in this district, we absolutely love it, it's amazing. But then you're going to also find people that may not have had the same experience
Right.
as somebody else. And there are vocal people on both sides, and you have to read between the lines for some of that. And every student is different, every family's experience is different, and every family's stake in education is different as well. So, obviously, being an educator, we have really high expectations of our children and what they will act like as students and the education that we're hoping they will get. So, we've always very much promoted a pro school environment, a pro teacher pro get an education, pro be a big part of your school community. And so you have to kind of take some of those mixed reviews, because I know, like, I love where I teach and I love where we send our children to school, and I've seen reviews on both sides, and definitely some of the reviews that are on the negative side, I'm like, nope, that's absolutely not correct. Or, oh, nope, I totally disagree with that. And it comes from whatever experience or maybe whoever they have talked to. So you can't really always base your, I guess I would say Facebook is not always the best place to go find your knowledge, because you'll get both sides, which it's not bad to have both sides, but you have to be careful.
So that leads me to one of the questions I have. We're moving to the school district. It's someplace new, and so the parents are doing their research. When they begin, because we know some of the more public places like Facebook, we're going to get a little bit of everything, right? Not exactly reliable. Websites will tell us so much in technical, right, writing, things like that. Is it is it does it behoove a parent to maybe try and set up an interview with that school teacher before before the school year begins? Like, let's say it's summer, school begins in a few weeks, and of course you register them, things like that. Is that something that parents can do before the school year begins, is to actually talk to who their school teacher is going to be?
Uh, yes and no. Most likely, you will not be able to talk to the teacher, because a lot of districts are not, if it's summertime, they may not be completely set on their rosters. And depending on where the numbers fall, most districts tend not to give their teacher list before school, too soon before school starts, because changes always happen. Numbers go up, numbers go down. But one thing that you can do, and I see happen all the time, is you can always go on a tour of a school. You can always, if you're thinking
Hmm.
about, I'm going to buy a house in this area, I see that's the elementary school, I highly encourage you to go on a tour of the school and take your child, because you're, as a human being and as a parent, you're going to walk through and you're going to get a feel. You're going to get a sense of how things are, how's the community. It gives you an opportunity to look at what's in the hallways, what's on the walls. I know when people come and tour the school that I'm in, depending on the age of your child, the principal typically walks them through, walks them down the hallway. Like, I teach second grade, so if they have an incoming second grader, they'll walk them by and they'll stand in my doorway and the other classrooms, and they'll, if I'm not in the middle of a lesson, I might be able to come over and say, oh, where are you coming from? And kind of just engage in a little bit of, here's who I am. There's 4 second grade teachers in our hallway. This is all second grade in here. And we can have some mild conversation, but then you can also see some of the classrooms. And typically, I know my principal will take you on a tour so that you can see the gymnasium, the cafeteria, you walk through the library, and you get to meet a few people. And as you're walking by, my principal will introduce you to potentially anyone. You might meet the music teacher, who is going to engage you quickly, because of course they're on the clock and probably on their way to something. But you'll get to have a little bit of feel. You'll be able to see some of the bulletin boards might show, like, what's the latest, like PTO push. Like, are we having a fundraiser, or is there a family fun night coming? And then you can kind of ask some of those questions too as you're walking and talking.
Hmm.
The principal is going to be like, oh, we've got a really strong PTO. Here's when we do the meetings for the PTO. Here's some fun things that we do with our students. We have, March is reading month, and we make sure that during that time we have books and bingo. And, so you'll get to hear some of um, the little things that you would get before you even come. And then your child can hear some of that as well, which is going to help them. If you do choose that school, then they've already got a picture. But the biggest thing is, like, if you are thinking about moving to an area and you're going to target a certain spot in that district, then definitely go tour that school before the school year is out, the previous year, if you can. Now, if you're moving over the summer, obviously you can't. But if you're, if doable, then go
Right.
see it before that school closes up, because then you will get to see a little bit more of things in action, the feel of stuff. Um,
Well, that's really interesting. I did not know. I'm learning something here
Yes.
today.
Yes.
I didn't know you could tour a school
Yeah.
before going there. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And like you said,
Absolutely.
that's typically the principal that takes you through, right?
If the
Like,
principal is available and there that
okay.
day, if not, I know like our principal secretary has taken people on tour, but I definitely would make an appointment. I would not just
Oh,
stop
sure.
by.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would I would
That
make an
makes sense.
appointment just because then you might be able to get the principal's time.
Sure.
And I think just by human nature, we can decide whether that feels good to us or doesn't feel good.
Okay. All
So,
right.
hmm,
So, so let's say we're in the middle of the school year and we purchased a home in a new school, right? And let's just assume that they know what classroom the child's going to go into, right? Everyone's registered, we're all set up, and we know it's going to be Mrs. Smith or whoever is going to be the teacher. Is would it be worth, or is it possible to either set up a meeting with that teacher beforehand or an email or something? And what I'm thinking of when I ask this question is, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a second here, is okay, so let's assume that we're in the middle of the school year and family has purchased. This is gonna be fun. and, and so the family's moving in the middle of the year. Everyone's registered. We know what classroom the child's going to be in. So they're going to be in second grade with
Mrs. Gutierrez.
Mrs. Gutierrez. So is it possible, or is recommended that a parent just being like, okay, this is going to be a new situation for my child. They're younger. They're in second grade. They might be a little nervous, a little scared. Yeah, we had, a quick tour, or spoke to the principal over the phone or something. But now this is more about the child themselves. So we parents have done our research, right? Or the buyer's parents have done their research. Is it a good thing to try and speak to that teacher before, let's say they're going to start class next week, right? And it's all set up and ready to go. Is that something that's done or encouraged, or how does that work? Is there a system for that?
Um, well, every school district, every school, and every teacher are different in what they might do. So,
Hmm.
obviously, teachers are teaching all day, and the minutes that they're not teaching are pretty small and pretty busy. So, depending on what goes on, I know where I teach, typically somebody goes in, maybe they take the tour or they just register their child, and then the secretary kind of shoots me an email and says, "Hey, FYI, you're getting a new student. They're starting this date." And typically, you cannot start immediately the next day. I think there is some policy in the district that there has to at least be a couple of days in order for your teacher to prepare for that student. And in that time, different teachers might do different things. They might, if they're giving your information like an email right away, they might email you kind of like their opening day packet that they would have sent to parents in September. Or they just might reach out and say, "Oh, I'm so happy that you're joining our classroom. Please respond to this email so I know that this is a good email and I'll start adding you to our stuff." And then that first day, they'll send home information about the classroom. So there's different dynamics of how things are set up. And it really is just based on the teacher, the school policy, the district policy. So, but the biggest thing is that if you're moving mid-year, teachers are really empathetic to the fact that your child's coming in and there's already this community that's been built. And
Okay.
so in elementary school, just by the nature of who we are as teachers, and, obviously we've signed on to this kind of job for the kids, not for all the other things that go along with it. But, teachers have things that they do that they have in place already. So when that child arrives, like for example, for me, there will be a sign on that child's locker that says, "Welcome to second grade." And I know typically my principal will greet them at the door that day
Okay.
and personally walk them down, or the secretary will if he's unavailable, and bring them to the classroom and introduce them to me if I haven't met them. Because typically where I teach, we don't get a meeting beforehand.
Okay. So
And why we don't do that, I think it's just an essence of time
okay.
and when we could do it.
Okay. So you're moving to a new district, you're a buyer, and you have a young child, and they're really nervous. They're really freaked out. They're feeling high anxiety level from changing schools.
Hmm.
Is that an occasion for a parent to reach out to the teacher to perhaps put that on the teacher's radar? Let's say that the child's just really nervous. They're feeling a lot of anxiety coming to a new school. Is that something that the parent should reach out to the teacher ahead of time just to kind of let them know? Or
Absolutely. I mean,
okay.
I applaud parents that shoot me an email in the morning, and regardless of whether it's a new student or just a student I've had for 150 days, and they're like, "Hey, you know what? Little Brian was crying when he got on the bus this morning. We woke up late. Things were crazy. Just giving you a heads up." And so, as a teacher, then I can, typically I can, if as long as it's before the school day, most teachers are, plugging in really quick before the school day starts to check for things like that. But then the kids come in, and then we can check on them right away, or we can go and give them a little couple of minutes time just to help them out, or we're watching for them in the hallway. Now, something to keep in mind is when a student is coming to a new school, like I was saying, teachers will do little things that will help. Will ensure that we buddy them up and stuff like that. But kids are really way more resilient than we give them credit for. I mean, now obviously, if you have a child who does have like a diagnosed anxiety, or something that really kind of, you know like makes it challenging for them to do that, to
Mm-hmm.
to have changes in their life and that kind of thing. But typically those kinds of things we would know in advance, or we would hope that parents would let us know in advance, because then we can dive in a little bit more. But the like most students, they might be a little nervous that first day, but once they get there, all of that kind of does go away. They're very resilient little humans, and I think it comes from the you know every school is basically the same. It's
Yeah,
when,
they're all different, but kind of the same.
yeah,
Kind of like kids.
yeah, very much so. But I mean, if you think about it, like if they walk into a classroom, and they've been in a classroom before, like a classroom's a classroom, and
Right,
hopefully,
right.
hopefully they'll, you know, hopefully the teacher's got some things in place. But most teachers, especially of younger kids, were like, all right, who's going to be Joey's buddy? You know what? Or right away, I'll be like,
Okay,
you two, he's sitting by you, you're in charge of Joey, and making sure that Joey has someone to play with, Joey has someone to eat with. If
okay.
Joey has a question, so
All right, so here's a question for you.
yeah.
So the more helicopter parents, right? All right, we have little Joey entering a new school. And so am I, as a parent, wanting to volunteer right away to work in the classroom that first week, to whatever, help sort papers, or whatever, or to be there? And like, is that new student with the concerned parent early on, is that a good thing? Or is that something that you should maybe let the kid kind of assimilate first, and then, yeah, of course there's nothing wrong with parents volunteering. we we,
No,
we
yeah,
like that, right?
yeah, we
Like, what
love
do you
having
think
you come.
about that? Like, how do you feel about, when
um
should the parent come into the classroom in this kind of circumstance?
well, fortunately and unfortunately, COVID has really changed the dynamic of how open our doors are.
Okay.
And so that's something that parents also have to understand and be prepared for, because every school district and every building is a little bit different. Like, uh, you know, n- unfortunately, we no longer allow parents to come in and walk their kids to the classroom every day, and that is something that is a big change that has happened within the last like 6, 7, 8 years, unfortunately. But
Okay.
so
But saying that there is allowable access, just
well,
for the
I mean,
conversation,
I would
is that something
again,
you encourage, or
no,
parents wait a minute?
no,
Yeah, what
I
do you think?
would I would say rip off the Band-Aid and send them in a little bit. And then, if the dynamic is still challenging, it should get less and less. Like that first day is going to be a challenge. But I also think as a parent, like it's all about your like the way you handle it. Like I said, the kids are very resilient, but the parents sometimes are not.
Well, I got all right. So
Okay,
all
so
right. Hang on.
and Brian will be the first to tell you that I threw him under the bus and made him
Yeah,
take our baby to
yeah,
daycare for her first time.
yeah.
Who
I can I tell this story? Can
No,
I tell it?
because you
Yeah,
tell it
yeah.
in such a way
No,
that
no, no.
makes me look like
Oh
a
no,
bad
no, no, no.
parent, but
So
I'm teaching your
right.
children,
So
so I
anyway,
can't.
well,
I could not take our daughter to daycare for her
okay. Here
first
we
time.
go. All right.
Okay,
So
all right,
my
Brian, you
lovely
tell the
wife
story.
was helping
Saving the world,
other
teaching the
children.
kids.
Exactly, saving
Yeah,
the world, saving kids.
teaching all the children.
Exactly. So the first day of daycare for our daughter,
Preschool,
our first one,
preschool,
what did I say?
daycare.
Oh no, as preschool, correct. You're right. And so, as always, honey. So, so it was the first day
Back
of
out.
preschool, and while Kim was saving the world, helping children, I got chosen or delegated to take our first daughter to preschool on the first day. And it was, I won't lie, it was awful. So I have
Mhm.
her there. We're like, oh, I'm trying to be positive. Oh, we're going to preschool. It's going to be great. You're going to meet so many kids, blah, blah, blah. Right. And I'll tell you, then once we got there, I come into the room, and the room was nice. It was happy and cheerful, full of kids. There's, 3 teachers in that room. So I
Yes,
was
wonderful
well
place.
staffed. It was great. And so I come walking in, and and it was funny because as soon as I got my daughter there, and she had been around other kids before, but she was just like not that many kids because, of course, the preschool her first time, right? So all the kids, right, kind of take notice because there's a new kid in the room, right? And so they all kind of look at her at the same time. She's kind of like, and I'm like, it's okay. This is gonna be so much fun. Kim coached me had a few phrases to say, try to smooth things over, and then and then I go to like set her down, and she was okay with that. So I'm standing there, and I set her down like at my feet, right? So she's kind of leaning up against me. Like I set her down, and the teachers come over like, oh, hi Romy, how are you? We're your new teachers and everything's fine. Well, as soon as Romy got down on the kids level, out of curiosity, all the kids not rush, but they all like they all close in on her, right? Because they want to meet the new kid, and in a nice way. It wasn't bad, but to her, it was like, what are all these kids, right? And everyone got all too close in her space, and of course, she starts to cry. She grabs onto me, and instinctively, as a dad, right, I pick her up, you know, and then the
Rookie.
waterworks start, and she's crying, and oh yeah, no, dad, no, and then what? But what did the teachers say? They were like, you got to give her to us. Hand her over. Like, give
Time
her
to
to
go.
us now. Like, and I'm like, how can I do this? And like, she's like, clinging on to me like the kids. And she's looking at the kids, and she's looking at me, and she's looking at the teachers, not knowing what to do. I'm just like the new dad. Like, what's going on? This is awful. I feel like the worst dad ever. And finally, the teachers were like, sir, you just got to let her go and walk out of the room. Give her to us, walk out of the room. We see this all the time. I know we
Ugh.
parents are instructed by teachers.
Rip off that band-aid.
That's right. That's the worst band-aid of them all. So here I am handing her over. So I'm trying to hand her forward. She's grabbing onto my shirt like, no, Dad. I'm like, no. Oh, it was terrible. It was awful. And then the teachers get them, and then they pointed. They're like, get out, go, turn around, leave. And I'm like, fine. And I walk out, and the door closes behind me, and I can still hear her crying, and I felt so awful. It was terrible. But I will say, because I also had to pick her up at the end of the day, she was fine by the end of the day. She was playing with the kids on the carpet and doing whatever. And she was obviously very glad to see me because, it's the beginning of her being away from us parents all day long, right? So, I mean, she was very glad to see me, but she was also okay. And then the next day, it was fine when I
It
went to
was
drop her
easier.
off. Yeah, it was
And to
easier.
this day, the only person that
Yeah,
remembers that awful moment is
it
Brian.
was terrifying. It was awful.
Yeah, our daughter does not
Oh,
reference that. She doesn't throw that at him, and she's a teenager now, so they are more than happy to rub stuff in your face. But
oh,
no, I mean, as a teacher, like we do need you to try to give them the independence to go, and because when you leave, they are on their own in some capacity, and that I think is, especially with your oldest, that is one of the hardest things. Is, you want to walk them in and help them unpack their backpack and help them, take care of their things and stuff like that. But your teacher has anywhere from 20 to 24 other kids, and they can't do that for them.
Right. And one
And
thing
so,
I have learned from you is
yeah,
that part of the teaching process is that independence
yeah,
to take your coat on and off, your boots, your backpack.
yeah.
I've heard you speak on that many
Yeah.
times, and
And the
that's
kids
part of the
love that.
process.
They love learning the independence of what they can do. And they may, I mean, let's be real, at home, they may not show that independence. They're more than happy to have us help them all the time or do it for them. But we have to, that's where we as parents have to gently nudge and gently push. And so, no, I do think, like, as when if you are a parent who can volunteer, yes, get your name on that list. But I definitely would give your child time to acclimate and to discover that the school is great. But also, it's about how you present it to them, and how you have to really think about the way that you phrase things to them.
Okay, and that segues right into my next question. So now let's take this out of the classroom. So now you're a parent. So what advice can you give to parents? Um, say a day or two. Say it's the weekend before classes start on Monday. What are some what are some of the things that parents can uh, phrase or talk to their kids about how to prepare them? This is as a parent now outside of the classroom, getting them ready to begin in a day or two.
Well, I mean, really, you need to help your child understand that they're not the only nervous person. Like, if
Okay. All
they're
right.
expressing, like, I'm super nervous, I'm scared, I don't want to go, be honest, be like, you're not going to be the only one that's nervous. And I've always told my class on the first day of school that even the teachers are nervous. I'm like, I've done this 21 times and I'm always nervous. And I'm like,
Mm.
and I'm the one that's in charge. But as a parent, like, you can say to them, you know what? Everyone else is nervous. Everyone else doesn't know what's going on. But here's what you do know. You know your classroom is going to have a teacher. It's going to have kids. You know you're going to have some sort of recess. You know there's going to be lunch. You know there's going to be some part of the day that and just start listing the things that they'll be doing so that they're focused on what they're going to be doing,
Ah, okay.
not what they're going to be worried about. So,
All right.
and especially, like, I mean, if you have a child who's already been through school, then they're going to be like, oh, yeah, I do know that format. I know that structure. I know that day. And children take great comfort in structure. That is one thing that that is really important to them. They thrive that structure. As a teacher, I know that the children that don't have great structure at home or don't have great independence at home, they actually really love school. And I
Hmm.
think it's because they get that structure that's set up for them. So if you start referencing all the things they're going to be doing and all the things that are the positive, then they're going to be more apt to be like, oh, yeah, I totally remember from kindergarten.
You're listening to the Bryan G Real Estate Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about me, check out my YouTube channel, Bryan Gutierrez Keller Williams Real Estate, or go to my Facebook page, Bryan Gutierrez Keller Williams. And if you want to hear more of this podcast, please subscribe. Now back to the show. Okay, so let's get into a couple more specific examples. So, child looks at you and says, Mom, what if the kids are mean? What if I get there and like the kids don't like me?
Throw them back a question. Say, well, how are you going to handle that?
And what if the kid says, I don't know?
Say, well, what'd you do last time that happened? And then they're going to say one of two things. They're going to say, well, that's never happened. And that's when you go, well, then why do you think it's going to happen this year?
Okay.
Or if they say, well, I just looked at that kid and told him to stop it. And I said, do you think that'll work this year? Well, I can try it. And so then they've already thought through the strategy. And the biggest thing too is, like, when you're talking with your kids, to make sure that you're helping them to discover and remember the things they know how to do. So if you always supply them with the answers, they never have to find those answers on their own, or they never have to remember that they have the power already because they already know. So sometimes it sounds a little tricky, like, and it sounds a little like you're not being helpful, but you actually are. So when
Okay.
they say, Mom, I had a problem with this kid last year, be like, well, was that, like, maybe that kid's not in your class, or, okay, what'd you do last year that helped? Or, and as a parent, it is also our job to remind kids that they're not going to like everything. And that's fine. Your child can be uncomfortable. They can not like something. They can be bored. And that's fine because you know what? They learn skills when all of that's happening. So when your child
Hmm.
is uncomfortable, they're learning some skills on how do I manage being uncomfortable? What do I do when I'm uncomfortable? Where do I get help when I'm uncomfortable? So if they're uncomfortable, it's not really a bad thing because they're learning. Same thing with when they are bored. If they're bored, they typically will figure out something to do, but also they need to learn that sometimes they just have to wait. And that's something as parents, that's our job to be like, no, you know what? You're just going to sit here for a minute and you're going to wait and you're going to be patient. Children learn patience when they're bored.
Right. And that really does touch on a couple of things. Like I remember we had moved from, I'd been in one school district up until third grade. And then when I started fourth grade, we went to another school district. And the math from our previous school district was way ahead of the other. So I remember sitting there for math class being bored.
Yeah.
And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, I did this, what felt like to a, fourth grader a year ago, and why isn't anyone else doing this, right? And so I was bored there for a minute. Now, because districts are very similar in their curriculum, it quickly caught up. Yeah, but there was a few months there where I was kind of bored. And what you're talking about on a child's level also applies to an adult level when we talk about comfort zone,
Mm-hmm.
right? We all would love to stay in our little protective bubble that we really, that we like. We know what to expect, right? That's why the comfort zone is so, desired and makes us feel so good because we're secure in that.
Yep.
But unless you step out of your comfort zone, you're not going to grow.
No.
And I think that's exactly what you're saying. And that's a really good point. And this applies not only to kids, adults, but it also applies to us adults too.
Mm-hmm.
I did a whole other episode on that.
Well, and you have to, I mean, you can't constantly remove the challenges. And that's, as parents by nature, like Bryan that day for preschool, he would have probably much rather just scooped her up and brought her home.
Mm,
But you know what? Like she needed that socialization. She needed to be in preschool. She needed that different dynamic in her life to help her to continue to grow. So we as parents, we want to rescue them and we want to constantly like provide for them, but it actually it's not doing them well. So the fact that they have a challenge, we want to let them try to get through that challenge because you know what, there's a lot of things that they're going to learn from that challenge. And you know what, depending on what it is, they might just be like, I don't want this to ever happen again. And so then they won't do that again. I mean, it's all about like, like I remember telling a lie as a kid and getting busted for it. And I never want to feel that way again. And I remember like I was pretty, like I did a
right.
really dumb thing. I knew better and I lied about it. And man, that was the hardest feeling ever to be like, this, why did I do this? This was so stupid. And so you know what? I never did that again. And we have to let them have challenges. So when you move to a new school, a lot of it's going to be on you to help them understand this will be good. This will be fine. Look at all, like as you're walking to school that first morning, be careful what you say. Like, don't be like, well, I'll be waiting for you at the end of the day. And if you have a bad day, you never ever want to reference if it's going to go poorly.
Mm,
You want to reference the opposite. You want to say, I can't wait to pick you up and have you tell me something great. Now, again, if you do have a child that has different circumstances, maybe they suffer from anxiety or maybe suffer from depression in some way, a little tip is to be like, okay, as you're hanging out today in this school, I know you're not really keen on this idea, but I want you to find 3 things that you're going to tell me at the end of the day that went well.
mm,
And that sets their mindset to have to find something to focus on that's good because you're not accepting them telling you everything that's bad. And I'm
right.
not saying to not allow your child to tell you what went wrong, but you have to make sure they have a balance of that because we have to help them acclimate. And some of the acclimation comes from our conversations that we have for them. My hairdresser taught me that she asked her kids at the end of every day, she said, tell me your high and tell me your low.
There you go.
And it was super simple. And they got to choose which one they went with. Didn't matter to her.
Okay.
And she said it was great because they got to tell me something that bothered them. But then she goes, but we would find on the days that they started with their low wasn't a big deal, but it was something that was there and it got off their chest. But then she said the more they talked about it, like sometimes they would be like, well, I didn't really have a low. And so they just shared their high.
Right. And this seems really obvious, but it's really taking the time to listen to the child and try not to finish that sentence for them, because kids
Yeah.
are struggling for the vocabulary, the language, and if they're younger, they may not have a word for a complex
No.
situation, right? So when you ask
or it
them,
might take like 10 days to get to that point.
yeah, so right, share something with me if they're struggling for the words. Don't finish that sentence for them. I learned that from you. Very important. Like, let them work it out as best they can, right? And if they get stuck or they're stumped, you can ask a couple more questions to kind of, give it a little bit different context, maybe to help them along, to kind of trigger those words that they can use. But yeah, listening's super, super important. And these, as a parent, and these are life skills, right? These are skills you're going to bring into adulthood, teaching your children this, because I come home to Kim every once in a while, like, I had another agent who was bad to me today. She'd be like, oh, and how did you handle that? Did you handle it like last time?
What makes you say that? And here's something, you said sometimes that's the most obvious thing, and sometimes it's the most simple thing. So, maybe 10 years ago, I went to this training and it talked about, how to get kids to like explain more. And I mean, it has many layers, but one of the things it said, get rid of the why and ask what makes you say that. And at this point, I've been teaching 11 years and I was like, how hokey sounding is that? Like, that just sounds ridiculous. I'm like, I was like, why? Like, can I just ask why? Well, let me tell you, I went back to school the next day. And as the kids did something, instead of saying why, I would say, well, what makes you say that? And literally, if I asked why, crickets. Or the one kid who raises their hand all the time and probably doesn't have the answer, would have their hand up. But as soon as I said, what makes you say that? All of a sudden, there were 10 kids who were like, and I noticed this crazy rise in the amount of engagement and the kids that were willing to share. And their answers were way more poignant and way more like involved and engaged. And I literally was like, I remember after that first week of just switching from why to what makes you say that, I was like, that is amazing. And there was just something about the dynamic. If you say why, the kids are going to go like this, and they have no backup. Yeah. But what makes you say that? That's a totally different frame of thinking. Like, well, like if they come home and they say, I had a terrible day. And if you say, well, what makes you say that? They're going to be like, well, Bryan kept kicking my chair again. And, they're going to give you details, where if you just say why, they're going to be like, it was just terrible. That's all.
Yeah. It's a lot more open-ended.
Yeah. And it was just, so some of that kind of stuff. So, I mean, moving your kids to another school, like, it's challenging. There's no doubt about it. But you know what? Teachers are not, they're not going to ignore it. Like the beginning of the year in elementary school, we're always like, okay, who's brand new to Kent Lake? And, and those kids like raise their hand. And so we kind of try to ask a few things about them and we try to engage with them. But, and even a kid who comes in the middle of the year, we make sure that they have a buddy. Now, middle school and high school, that's a totally different beast that I don't know a lot about, but also those are totally different kids. And those, you can still be with your middle school and high schooler using some of those things and thinking about the phrasing. And, you can go tour the middle school. You can go tour the high school. You can go online together. When your kid's older, you can go online with them and be like, let's check out what the website has to say. Let's look at pictures that have been posted about the school so that they can already get a dynamic. But, a lot of how they handle it is how the parent is going to handle it, and just making sure that you're using a language that's positive about it, even if you yourself are like not not happy about this. Or, I mean, and some of us, we have to move and it's not a great situation. You had to move maybe to a place that you didn't want, but, that's hard to make your language fit what needs to happen.
Right. And something that tell me if I'm wrong here, is to uh, don't deliberately dumb it down or oversimplify the concept, right? Because kids, they are complex thinkers.
Yeah.
Now, for a younger child, you're using vocabulary that's much more
Yeah.
simple for them to get, right? You're not going to throw a bunch of 5 syllable words at them,
Right.
but it just seems in my experience with our kids is that it can still be a complex subject, in problem solving, but don't dumb it down. Like, do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I mean, kids know when we're kind of giving them a line,
mhm.
like, I mean, if they, like, I mean, I'll look right at our kids and I'll be like, this is really frustrating me, and like, I've got to figure out a way to figure this out. Like, so name your feeling and or name the feeling that you're having about the situation. That helps them a lot. The other thing to be thinking about is uh, I believe all of Michigan, for those of you that are moving within Michigan, there was some legislature that was passed that created some funding for every school district to now have a counselor in every building, whereas before counselors were shared around districts. And so, if your child is someone who is really struggling, and it could be with anything, maybe you're moving because of a divorce. And that's a huge change for your child. Or maybe you're moving because unfortunately you had to lose your home in some capacity. That's a lot for your child to navigate. And you should, you know, uh, try to feel comfortable enough to reach out to your child's teacher and just say, here's the dynamic of what's happening. And they can also pair you up with the counselor who can give you some tips, some language, some ideas. But also sometimes those counselors can become another adult that interacts with your child that can help them navigate this new situation. And and they kind of get a bad rap because their title is social worker, and that does not have anything really to do with like CPS, kind of like, like the social workers that come and investigate your home and stuff like that. Social workers within school have the title of social work because that's the title that they earn their degree from college.
Right, but they're really more
But they're
counselors,
really a
right?
counselor and they're there to help and support kids. So, the more information that you give to your child's teacher about that move and why that move happened, that can only help them, because then if it's a big deal, they can get the help or give the time to your child that they need. If it's just you moved because you moved, your kid's probably going to be fine. Like, they're super resilient, and sometimes they love being that new kid on the block.
Right, right.
So,
So, are there any other final parting thoughts you'd like to share with anyone?
no, I know you had asked me about the allergies, and every district runs it a little bit different. I know our daughter has an allergy, and the difference between our district where we live and the district that I teach, totally different processes. So, I mean, those kind of things you definitely want to, any medical condition, you want to make sure that the office knows it right away. Even if your child just takes medication at home every day,
Hmm.
it's good to inform the school so that if something were to happen during the day, that, again, they have that information. But
Right, because certain allergies can kind of trigger behaviors
yeah,
that may seem uh, like a behavior when it's really a physical symptom of
yeah,
something, right? So if they don't know about it, they think your kid's acting in one kind of way when really it's just a physical
yeah,
reaction to maybe
yeah.
an allergy or something,
Well,
right?
or just any kind of medication that you might be taking on the side.
True, that's
So,
right. Yeah.
um, but uh, but yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I would say is make sure that you're taking that tour. I think if you're worried about your child acclimating, that can be the biggest thing that helps them, because then they have a visual. When children have things explained to them and there is a visual piece to that, they tend to be able to kind of organize that and understand that in their head a lot better than if it's just like, hey, we're moving to this new school, you're starting tomorrow. If you can give them that time, but
Sure.
yeah.
And usually in the moving process, the average time from accepting an offer to acceptance is 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
There's occupancy after that. You could have another couple of weeks. So you're really looking on average between 4 to 6 weeks. And this is before you even move into the house.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's definitely plenty of time for parents to be able to do their research on the school district, right? Do their due diligence, and also kind of start preparing the kids. So, what have we learned today? We've learned.
I don't know, Bryan, you tell me. What did you learn today?
So, what we've learned today is that we need to encourage independence with our children and entering a new environment.
Yes.
And we need to encourage them to also, in a healthy way, step out of their comfort zone, and how that's a good thing. And they will, communicate to them that they will surprise themselves in a positive way if they do so. And of course, if there's any problems, they can come to you as a parent. And to also, parents, listen to your children, listen to what they're saying. Don't finish their sentences, right? Help them complete that thought and communicate that to you in their own words.
Right. But also investigate what they're saying a little bit more if it doesn't make sense. If something's not adding up, you might want to. And again, as teachers, we get emails like that all the time. We'll get the, so that's
and this also applies in real world, because when I'm not making sense, Kim definitely goes further to qualify what I'm saying.
I definitely pull out some teacher talk to Bryan.
Well, anyway, another thing I already knew that I didn't learn, but I will share with everyone, is that my lovely, intelligent, beautiful wife once again has shared something really valuable with me and with all of you. So thanks for taking time out of your busy.
Bryan, what makes you say that? What makes you say that?
Total love and affection. Total love.
See, it works. You get the answer you're looking for. So,
all right. Well, thanks, honey. Thanks
anytime,
for coming on
hon.
the show. I think this will be really useful to a lot of parents out there.
I hope so. Just remember, they'll be all right. Teachers go into teaching because they want to be with your kids. And if your kid's struggling, they're going to help them. So, yeah. So take care.
That's a great final note. Thank you so much.